Hello Bookfighters, it is Thursday, and this week I'm talking about Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Before I do that though, I do want to apologize for missing my video last week. I was in a cabin in North Carolina and I thought I was going to have internet access, and then I did not until Friday, which was rather inconvenient as far as video making is concerned. Okay, so the book. I will say that I enjoyed it, though it's probably not one that I'm ever going to really go back to. It was a good read once, but not one that I ever feel the need to revisit again, most likely. For one thing, I had the same issue with it that Julia had with one of the books she read this month, that it definitely is the first book in a series, or there's meant to be a sequel after it or something, because it didn't end all the way. The story didn't really come to like a satisfactory close. I mean, the story within the book itself came full circle, but there was a lot of things that were left open and are clearly meant to be resolved later, which, without knowing that it was going to be a series, was a little bit of a letdown. If I'd have known that there were going to be more coming after it from the beginning, it might have felt different. Side note, why don't authors just write one-off books anymore? I feel like every new book that's been coming out lately, especially ones that get popular, have all been series. And I feel like it's unnecessary. Like, just write everything that you want to write in one book, and then write another book that has nothing to do with that book. There's too many series. There's too many sequels. There's too many things that go on and on forever. I want just a solitary novel. Solitary modern novel. That's what I'm looking for in my life right now, and it's increasingly hard to find. As for this book itself, it was a fun read. It was an easy read. It was enjoyable. The story was interesting. It was a little X-Men-ish, thematically speaking. I mean, not to say that it's an X-Men knockoff, because it's absolutely not. It's just like, this book is similar to X-Men in the way that The Hunger Games is similar to 1984. Do you know what I mean? It's not a particularly deep book. Like, I didn't come away from it having thoughts about life in general. It was really one of those books that's just the story itself. I mean, there's some depth to it. I mean, it's a coming-of-age story, so there's all of those themes, and, you know, you're dealing with an othered class of people, so you get all those themes with it too. But nothing particularly new on the philosophical level, and nothing particularly deep either, which is fine. Not every book needs to be that, but if that's what you're looking for, this is probably not the book for you. It's no Fault in Our Stars looking for Alaska sort of situation. Okay, I feel like I've just been ragging on this book so far. I did genuinely enjoy it. I thought the bad guys in particular, the villains in this story, were definitely interesting. More interesting than say, your average young adult stock. More interesting than Twilight, certainly, but, you know, it's hard not to be more interesting than Twilight, so. Now, if you've seen any of John Green's videos where he talks about this book, then you already know this, but it's full of these old, vintage photographs, and they're all tied into the story, and I thought that was interesting, because they're all genuine photographs. They're not things that were mocked up for the sake of the story. There is a note in back that says a few of them were altered, and it's pretty obvious which ones were altered. I mean, it's not the best Photoshop situation that's ever happened. Again, I'm criticizing. I need to talk about the things I liked about it. But the photographs did add a lot, and it was definitely something different, something new that you haven't seen in every novel before. I don't know how well the novel would have stood up without the photographs, because they really did bring a lot to the story, but the photographs are there, so it's not really something we need to question. The primary issue that I had with this novel is the same one that I have with most young adult novels, and probably an issue that a lot of people have when they read young adult novels, which could be why they don't read them very often, and they have sort of the bad reputation that they do. But I feel like, generally speaking, protagonists in young adult novels are all the same character, but with a different setting and costume. But at their core, they're the same. Like, they're all those sort of generic teenagers that they're not popular, but they're not part of the bad crowd either, and they're not the social leper of the school. They're just sort of generic, midstream sort of kids that have, you know, regular, okay relationships with their parents, and that's sort of all. Just boring people. They're just boring people, and they're all the same. in young adult novels. Like, this is what the protagonist of every young adult novel is. It's the same, this is the protagonist of every Disney Channel series as well. It's just that sort of awkward, but likable in their sort of dweebiness sort of way character. They're not particularly academic, they're not particularly athletic, they're not particularly anything. They're just sort of generic stock people, and I find that very tiresome, which is why when I read too many young adult novels, I sort of need to put them down and read something else for a while, because the protagonist is always the same, and that's not a character that I can relate to. And I don't think it's a character that anyone can relate to particularly strongly. I mean, I already said in my first video this month that I'm definitely pro young adult and children's literature. I think that everyone should read it, but young adult authors, we need to get better protagonists. Like, why don't we have books about the popular girl that's nice to everybody but goes home and has like a terrible narcissistic drunken mother, or the bad seed kid that has really great parents, but he's had this horrible thing happen to him in his youth, and now he's full of rage and no one understands him, and yeah, something like that. Just something different. I mean, those two examples aren't even characters that I would relate to or particularly want to read, but at least it would be something different from what we've already seen over and over and over again. And I feel like maybe it's a little bit of writing what you know, like the authors are writing about themselves as teenagers, and authors are quite similar people, generally on a broad scale sort of way, so they had similar youths. I don't know, I'm just guessing here. I'm just saying that young adult protagonists are boring. Boring, 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 boring. But that's just what I think. Go ahead and tell me, Bookfighters, what you think in your videos in this coming week. Do you feel that young adult protagonists are too generic and bland as I do, or do you find them really dynamic and interesting? Let me know, and commenters, let me know in the comments or in a video response. That would be fun too. And that's all I have for this week. Sorry I was kind of a Debbie Downer. I really didn't intend to be when I started filming this video, but you know, things don't always go according to plan. Anyway, Julia, I will see you tomorrow.